Compost Gardening, Utilization of Compost in Home Gardening by Joshua Chris A. Martinez. Dedication. I would like to dedicate this project to my parents, Mr. Ramon A. Martinez and Mrs. Ruby A. Martinez, for their enthusiasm and eagerness to guide and help. Moreover, I dedicate this to my sibling who helped me in accomplishing the task given, whether it be simple or difficult. Finally, I would like to dedicate this to all my friends and family members who shares the same interests as me in environmental works, gardening, and other things. Acknowledgement. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge the Director of the National Service Training Program here in PUP, Professor Ana S. Valenzuela, for spearheading the whole program. Secondly, I want to thank our very own professor, Mrs. Elizabeth Crayo, for giving us the proper guidance in implementing our home immersion program. Finally, I would like to thank my parents, Mr. Ramon A. Martinez and Mrs. Ruby A. Martinez, for giving me the opportunity to execute my immersion activity in our house without any hindrances, and also for helping me in every possible way they can all throughout the duration of the immersion activity. I'm very grateful to everyone who is involved in the completion of this activity. I could not have done it without all of them. Table of Content. Introductions. Second is Objectives. Third is Summary of Immersion. Fourth is Activities Undertaken. Fifth is Problems Encountered and Solutions. Sixth is Suggestions and Recommendations. Seventh is The Lesson Learned. Eighth is Victorious. Introduction. The use of compost materials in large agricultural areas and even in every people's own backyard has been one of many ways of plant soil preservation for over several decades. Ever since humanity has gained knowledge about the use of organic materials as a fertilizer. Though artificial and organic fertilizers have grown in popularity in terms of use, organic fertilizers such as compost materials will still be always the most environmental friendly choice, since it has no significant drawbacks in our environment, unlike the man-made fertilizers and insecticides. From a vague standpoint, composting enriches soil and the plant itself. However, from a more specific perspective, Grant 2020 study that the compost helps soil structure by creating aggregates or groups of loosely composed particles, hence allowing delicate young roots to penetrate the surface more easily. She also added that compost aids in nutrient retention, since compost are organic materials assembled together. It adds essential substances to the soil, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, as well as micronutrients such as manganese, iron, and zinc. In our house and even the other neighborhoods, here in our barangay, I've noticed that the use of organic materials as fertilizers are very rare. We often use chemically induced fertilizers which are easily found in the markets to alleviate the problems in their respective garden. The reasons behind this are mostly because it's more convenient to buy a ready-to-use fertilizer than creating it. It costs less time since every gardening store here in our community are selling these kinds of fertilizers. Although the previous statements are true, it's very alarming per se, because upon the studies of experts shows that the extensive use of chemical fertilizers might harden the soil, decrease fertility, increase pollution in air and water, deplete essential soil nutrients and minerals, and most importantly, it releases greenhouse gases which are hazardous to our environment. The aforementioned issues not only affect an individual, but it can also affect our own environment. Therefore, the use of compost materials in gardening can be a much viable option for both our gardens and the environment itself, since it poses less threats in terms of safety and hazard, and it can also give benefits to the overall conditions of our garden. Objectives. Within a 36-hour span, the intended goal of Project Compost Gardening is to increase the quality of both the soil and plants in the garden. It intends to accomplish the said task without the reliance on chemical-induced fertilizers that are found on the market. Through this activity, our home will be relying on a more cost-efficient and safe method of soil fertilization in the garden. It will surely lessen the cost of buying industrial fertilizers and increase the safety for both the garden and the neighborhood. Summary of immersion. The collection for the needed materials in composting was done solely through the organic waste that are found in the trainee's house. After collection, the trainee added all the needed ingredients, organic wastes and soils, to one another so that they'll be mixed. Furthermore, after mixing all the components, the trainee added water to maintain a certain level of moisture. The trainee continued to do this process so that the moisture level remained consistent from day to day, therefore speeding up the decomposition process. After all the components have decomposed into the soil, the trainee then began to add the product, which is the compost, to the desired plants in the garden. The trainee observed the progress from the day the compost was added up until the last day of immersion. Finally, after the observation, the progress was recorded thoroughly to determine if the compost have contributed significantly in the plant's growth. Activities undertaken: gathering and collection of materials. As you can see, there are watermelon waste, or assorted fruits and vegetables, banana peels, paper cuts and papers, and dried leaves. Shredding of materials. The aforementioned materials were shredded into pieces so that they can fit into the soil. Observation of compost within a 7-day period. Lastly, adding of compost in the desired plants. Problems encountered and solutions applied. The first problem encountered is the compost was too wet. Due to the unbalanced distribution of fresh materials, the moisture of the compost became too much, resulting in a foul odor and flies being dominant in the area where the compost is. Solution applied. The trainee began to add more dry materials in the compost, thus balancing the moisture level and setting the ratio to 1:1 between the fresh and dry materials. This reduces the moisture to a proper level. Second problem encountered is the compost was too acidic. Due to the initial problem, the compost also became too acidic, resulting to a foul smell and slow decomposition process. The solution applied. To counter this problem, the trainee then added wood ashes in the compost to fasten the decomposing process again and improve the overall smell of the compost. Suggestions and recommendations. First is, consider buying containers that are not secluded to allow more air to penetrate the compost. Always segregate brown and clean materials from one another. Third is, always be mindful of the overall condition of the compost. Fourth is, always consider the ratio of brown and clean materials. Brown materials are those that are dry, such as paper. Green materials are those that are wet or fresh, such as fruits, vegetables. Last is, always seek for guidance when encountering problems regarding the compost. The lesson learned. The lesson we learned is that we are no longer relying on industrial pesticides, hence less consumption of money. It also reduces the hazards coming from chemically induced fertilizers since composts are more environmental friendly. Lastly, organic materials found in our house can be turned into more useful usage through composting. Pictorial. The growth of bok choy with compost within a 13-day period. Before, it's too short. After the 13-day period, the leaves are more broad and the stems are taller. The growth of wild chili plant, again with a compost on a 13-day period. After the 13-day period, it developed a fruit that is close to maturity. Lastly is the growth of gumamela plant with compost within a 13-day period. Before, it doesn't have or it lacks any flowers. But after the 13-day period, it began to develop a flower which is continually growing each day. So that's all for this day. Thank you for watching and listening to my video.